This is the October 26th, 2023 electronic meeting of the Environmental Commission here in Ann Arbor. This meeting is in accordance with the executive orders set in place in 2020 by the governor to effect social distancing and mitigate the spread of the COVID-19 virus. We intend to conduct the meeting similar to an in-person meeting. Please be patient if there are technical issues. Public comment is welcome and will be via telephone only. To speak to the public at public comment, call 888-788-0099 and enter meeting ID 922-966-1644. This information is available on the published agenda in the public notices section of the city website and on the broadcast of this meeting on CTN channel 16, AT&T channel 99, and online at a2gov.org/watchctn. And with that, I would like to ask Sean to read the land heritage statement.
Yes, thank you, Chairperson Mitchell. I acknowledge that the land the city of Ann Arbor occupies is the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the Anishinaabe, including Odawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi, and Wyandot peoples. I further acknowledge that our city stands, like almost all property in the United States, on lands obtained generally in unconscionable ways from indigenous peoples. The taking of this land was formalized by the Treaty of Detroit in 1807. Knowing where we live, work, study, and recreate does not change the past, but a thorough understanding of the ongoing consequences of this past can empower us in our work to create a future that supports human flourishing and justice for all individuals.
Thank you, Sean. And would you now call the roll, please?
Sure. I do have a phone number on the line that I don't recognize, but if it is a commissioner, can you please raise your hand so I will promote you? If you're not a commissioner, keep your hand lowered. But if you are a commissioner, please raise your hand.
And the raise hand is *9.
*9 to raise your hand, yes.
Yeah, just in case somebody doesn't know.
All right, I'm not seeing a hand raised, so I don't think it's commissioner. So I'll do the roll call.
Thank you.
Sorry. Yes, Councilmember Ackman.
Here, Ann Arbor.
Thank you. Vice Chairperson Brown.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Thank you. Commissioner Callowart.
Here.
Thank you. Commissioner Curtis.
Here, Ann Arbor.
Thank you. Commissioner Dale.
Here, Ann Arbor.
Thank you. Councilmember Dish. Oh, looks like Councilmember Dish just joined. I'm going to promote them. Welcome, Councilmember Dish. We are doing roll call, and I just got to your name.
I'm here in Ann Arbor. Thank you. That was good.
Thank you. Commissioner Graham.
I'm here.
Thank you. Commissioner Gruber. All right. Commissioner Marson.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Thank you. Commissioner Mursky. All right. Chairperson Mitchell.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Thank you. Commissioner Nedrich.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Thank you. And Commissioner Whiting. All right. And that is a quorum.
All right. Super. Great. Thanks, everyone, who's here at the meeting tonight. I would now like to ask for a motion to approve our agenda for tonight. I see a hand, Chris Graham, and a second from Commissioner Curtis. Thank you. Is there any discussion of the agenda? And if not, I ask for a vote to approve the agenda. Raise your hand. Thank you. Looks like we have an agenda accepted. Thank you. I now ask for a motion to approve our minutes from September 28th. Commissioner Dish and seconded by Commissioner Dale. Thank you. Any discussion of the minutes from September? Seeing no hands, I call for a vote to approve the minutes from September. Raise your hand. Looks like Almost 100%. Is there a, okay, thank you. Thanks, everybody. Okay,
I'm
let's
gonna-
go for it.
Hey, Rita, I'm going to
Yes.
abstain. I'm going to abstain because I wasn't here.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for letting us know. Good point. All right, so that's minus or abstain on one, but passes by majority vote. So thank you all. I would now like to move to the section of our meeting, which is public comment. I'm going to read a brief statement. And this is when Sean usually pops up this information on the screen as well. This is an opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes. Please call 888-788-0099 and enter meeting ID 922-9696-1644. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand one by one, calling the last 3 digits of your phone number. In order to electronically raise your hand, please press *9 on your phone. You'll hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. You can press *6 to unmute your phone. When speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any TV or background noises so that we may hear you clearly. Please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. And do you see anyone who is interested in speaking with us?
Yes, we do have a hand raised from caller ending in 411. Again, that's phone
Okay.
number ending in 411. I'm now allowing you to talk.
Good evening, Chair Mitchell. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. This is James Demore, multitasking with a phone and trying to read a statement. So bear with me for just a sec while I switch screens here. And here we are. And I want to thank members of the Environmental Commission and good evening. My name is James Demore, and I speak to you as an environmental activist currently involved with several committees in the Michigan Sierra Club and a former member of the City Planning Commission. As you know, several months ago, a subcommittee related to natural features created a draft ordinance of a revised tree ordinance to replace language in Chapter 57. As I understand it, the Commission and others were advised by the Office of Sustainability Initiatives to hold off on further action until the Comprehensive Land Use Plan is revised. A question I ask here is this. Major decisions on rezoning and major new land parcels have been approved this year by the city before the Comprehensive Plan revision has even been underway, and the city has no hesitation in this area making these changes. Why is the question of protecting trees being delayed while other revisions of the city ordinances are moving forward? There appears to be a lack of fairness here. Mature deciduous trees, depending on the species, require decades of growth to provide carbon capture and creation of oxygen. Yet, recently I observed a public housing project clear-cut all the mature trees on this parcel close to my neighborhood. I should also note Concord Pines was approved earlier, and OSI has been silent on this matter. Providing seedlings and saplings OSI is doing, especially some of the conifers, does not address the climate crisis when short-term action is needed now. There seems to be hypocrisy on OSI's part, or at least enabling it. If we are truly to embrace taking on the climate crisis, then part and parcel of that is protecting our mature tree canopy. I'm surprised that OSI is intransigence related to this. Considering the hard work that members of this body have put and created a draft ordinance, and given the changes and impact on our natural features in the years a comprehensive plan use revision will be adopted, and that's going to be a long process, we really can't wait any longer. We must move now in moving the tree ordinance forward. And I hope this commission makes this message clear to members of this council. And to the council members here, please take note of this and act on it. Folks, thank you for taking consideration my remarks, and may each of you have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you. We always appreciate hearing from the public. Sean, are there any additional callers?
I do not see any additional callers.
All right. I would like to now move to our next agenda item, which is a presentation by a guest speaker, Heidi Trudell. I see her. Good. Heidi is a bird expert and has been involved in a group called Just Save Birds and more. You'll hear about it. And this is really important information for us to take in for our consideration as we advise council moving forward on how we continue to live with nature as we move forward as a city. And I also welcome Juliet Berger, who's here, who is our city ornithologist. And I'm really happy to have you with us tonight, Juliet. Both of you, Heidi. With that, I'm going to stop talking and ask you, Heidi, to further introduce yourself as you wish. And I know you have a presentation for us.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm going to attempt to share my screen. I hope everyone can hear me okay.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Can everyone see my screen? Hopefully.
It looks.
Can anyone
Is it
not
full screen?
It is not quite full screen, but if I go into slideshow,
Okay.
maybe that works.
That looks good to me.
Okay, cool. Yeah, please let me know if there's any formatting issues on your end. Anyway, the bottom line of this is there has been a lot of pushback in a lot of places bigger than us. And if they can do it, so can we. The list of tiny fine print places and organizations on the left, it's everything from colleges to actual states, municipalities, you name it. These are places that have already passed some level of bird safe building code or ordinance. And yes, I am wearing a lot of hats. Just Save Birds is my quasi-consulting side of life, but I have been wearing the Washtenaw Safe Passage hat with Washtenaw, I believe it's now Bird Alliance, or pending Bird Alliance, formerly known as Washtenaw Audubon. But I've also been working in a similar window collision prevention capacity with Safe Passage Great Lakes, which is also updating their name from Detroit Audubon to Detroit Bird Alliance. And I've been on the board with the Bird Center of Michigan, as well as the Conservation Committee for Black Swamp Bird Observatory. Pretty much all of these since sometime in 2015, 16, or 17. And there is a very long version of this presentation at the QR code, so feel free to take a screenshot or photo now, because the full version of this is over 100 slides long and gets into a little bit more detail than I have time for tonight. At least I won't keep you all night. I'll try not to. Of course, full screen, I can't see the clock, so you might have to cut me off at some point.
Okay.
But who I am, why I'm here. 20 years and 2 months ago in Southern Illinois, I made the mistake of being a bird-loving undergrad at a college that had big shiny windows, and every student on that campus told me every time they saw a dead bird, which was a lot, turns out. So I started a collision monitoring campus on that project, and after 3 years, I got out of there because I was the only student on campus doing it. It was a lot. It was chaos. I tried to branch out, did wind farm surveys in Texas. Turns out that's also a lot of dead birds. So I've tried, I swear I've tried. I've worked at zoos, I've worked at libraries, I've done tech startups. Turns out there's glass everywhere, and everywhere there's glass, birds are hitting. So on the side, I've always been cramming in window collision activism and advocacy. And then when I moved up here at the end of 2014, the Ypsilanti District Library was like right there, and I couldn't not check it. So that's where we are today. From 2015 till now, I've just been dead bird researching my way through Southeast Michigan and beyond. So yes, that's a lot of hats. And one of the biggest misconceptions regionally and globally is that if you turn off the lights, the birds are suddenly safe. And that is not at all the case. You can turn off all of the lights but that doesn't stop collisions during the day. I will say that I am thrilled that Ann Arbor has such a good lighting code and has made so much progress in that direction. There's obviously still a lot that we can do. My second love is moths, and moths are obviously very impacted by lights. But that being said, it's not just birds, it's not just moths. Light is bad for humans. A lot of bird people try to push for lights out programs during spring and fall migration, but like we have bats year round. Well, up here they either migrate or hibernate, but further south we have bats year round. Up here we have moths during the summer and birds during the summer and people during the summer. And I know because Ann Arbor is really pushing for sustainability goals, responsible lighting is really good for saving energy, reducing carbon emissions. Like it's the easiest thing we can do in that direction, but it does get way too much credit in the window collision side of things. And to also address some of the additional myths, skyscrapers get a lot of press because when things go terribly wrong, it's often at skyscrapers. I was unfortunately in Chicago on October 6th. Well, 5th was the day that everything went horribly wrong with birds at McCormick Place. I was driving into Chicago when that happened. On the 6th, I gave a presentation to architects about birds hitting windows in Chicago. But McCormick Place is not a tall building. The Ypsilanti District Library, also not a tall building. The average high rise and low rise generally kill between 25 and 30 birds a year. It's just with better landscaping, better habitat, bigger windows, more reflection. My worst low rise in Michigan kills upwards of 300 birds per year. Ypsi Library, somewhere, there are a lot of asterisks, minimum 70 that we find, but what we find is just the tip of the iceberg. And for residential buildings, obviously, the better the habitat, the more we try to make our yards attractive for wildlife, native plants, all that good stuff. We are attracting birds to an area that's dangerous unless we have fixed our windows. So this is a problem that will only stop when we run out of birds. And I'm not a fan of that idea. But yeah, so just to get this out there, high rises are a problem. They are not our problem. So we need to address it where it happens. This is a photo from somewhere on the U of M campus, I guess Tappan Hall, from 2016, I believe. If anyone wants to guess at how many birds, it's the same photo on each side. If anyone wants to guess how many birds are there, I will take a sip of water. It is a trick question.
Five.
It is 5. So basically, because warblers look like leaves and leaves look like leaves, it is really hard to spot birds that have hit windows. We are also up against lawnmowers, squirrels, cats, foxes, coyotes, you name it. What we find is a small fraction of what actually hits. It's guesstimated that for every bird we find, there are 5 to 8 that we don't. That could be because if it was lucky in quotes, it perhaps flew away to die elsewhere of its injuries. But a bird flying away, just if it's out of sight, it just dies out of sight. Full recovery is actually very low odds. Another myth is that migration happens in nicely defined flyway corridor things. The entire continent lights up at very different, in very different ways at different times of the year. Birds have zero regard for geography. They are going with the winds, and migration can shift very broadly from year to year. So what we end up with is really cool birds that are not ours. You know, they're breeding in the boreal forests of Canada, they're wintering in Central and South America, and they're dying at our windows because we happened to be there. I keep picking on the Ypsi District Library, but that's been there since 2006, and minimum 100 birds a year. These are coming from all over the place. Half of the birds in the photo should have been spending their winter on coffee farms in Central and South America eating coffee pests. So every time a bird hits your window, 50-50 odds that it should have been preventing coffee pests from getting at your beans. So the more things we kill, the more pesticide goes into the coffee. And then after I took the photo, I went back to the car, found 2 more hummingbirds on my way back to the car, which is why there are 2 little ovals there. So the birds that we're killing are not house sparrows, pigeons, starlings. The vast majority are species already in decline, and this is an extremely tangible way that we can reduce our impact. It's no wonder why they hit. So to give you an idea of what my first full fall study there showed, basically, if we were to fix just the worst buildings in the area, Ypsi, the library itself, is as bad as the 2 other worst buildings combined. So if we just fixed the worst 3 buildings that Washtenaw Safe Passage was monitoring at the time, we would have taken care of the vast majority of strikes for the region. Again, for every bird we find, there are 5 to 8 that we don't. These numbers are staggering. The species diversity is really phenomenal. This is a very biodiverse region. And the fact that a handful of buildings are doing this much cumulative damage, again, Ypsi Library has been there since 2006. It has not been decreasing in bird strikes year after year. They have no opportunity to learn. They live in Canada, and next year they might be migrating further east of here. Anyway, so the basics of bird collisions are essentially that if a bird thinks it can fly to something or through something, that's how they die. And in discussions with the actual architects of the biological sciences building, they said they specified glass as clear as possible so birds would see that there's nothing inside for them to go to. However, you will notice there's a very strong reflection of sky, and you can actually see vegetation on the other side of the building. We do know that this building is killing birds. I am not on the inside of that. I try to give them as much elbow room as possible, so I will not be uninvited. But I do know that they have a fair number of birds coming in to their collections as a result of striking. So another myth is the more masonry a building has, the safer it is. People think they need to build a perfect brick box to be safe for birds. Unfortunately, even with a brick box, if you have a window and it's not a safe box or a safe window, it's still, this is the natatorium on the EMU campus. It kills as many birds as the other average low rises around it. They're all just concentrated at very narrow windows because birds see essentially a tunnel that they can get through, but it's not. So you can build a fully glass box as long as it's a safe product. So there is nuance here. And unfortunately, most people think that putting glass is a light, like, oops, you hit a window. I see this in media all the time. Pick a movie that has a bird in it. The bird at some point, Harry Potter, Finding Nemo. Like every movie has birds hitting windows. Unfortunately, birds are moving headfirst at high speed, and they technically hit twice. When a bird hits glass, it first impacts usually face first, and then it falls. It's really hard to study the injuries that birds sustain when they hit because we don't know if they end up with coracoid fractures, dislocated. The injuries they sustain are really not okay. This is why I don't do bird rehab. I just pick up the dead ones because you can't stress out a dead bird. Bird Center of Michigan can rehab them all day. But yeah, the injuries they sustain untreated are more often than not fatal. That being said, if birds are lucky enough to survive, they're up against people, cats, dogs, squirrels, raccoons, possums, skunks. Protein is protein is protein. And what gets me is through white-throated sparrow studies, they have tracked how heavy the birds were that survived. Of course, they pick up survivors, weigh them, rehab them, release them. The birds that died also got weighed. And the birds that were plump and fat and juicy and most likely to survive migration, because physics is physics, were the ones more likely to die because they had that much extra weight behind them when they hit. Which means that the thinner birds, we can't really say emaciated because if they were that emaciated, migration would be iffy to begin with, but that is terrifying for overall population health. If our plump, juicy birds that should be making it to Central and South America in one easy go are the ones more likely to die on impact. So this has broad ramifications well beyond just like my windows can't be that bad. I only get X number per year. Again, for the ones we see, there's a lot we don't. A lot of folks also think that it's a quick death. Birds have a lot of extra vertebrae. They all have floppy necks. The injuries largely, if you're super lucky, it's quick, but there are so many that we find that definitely did not die a quick death. If you find a bird that looks like it's sleeping and is dead, that was not a fast death. If it was completely sprawled out, it probably, hopefully, died on impact and then fell that way. It's really traumatic for people who deal with this, obviously. But there's also this misperception that, like, oh, if you leave it alone, it'll be fine. Whereas if we saw a kitten or a puppy that had been hit by a car, we would know to take it to a vet. There's really not a good cultural understanding of rehabs exist for this reason. So, yeah, we at least have the Bird Center of Michigan, which is a phenomenal organization, and I would not have agreed to be on their board had it not been fantastic. Anyway, so the good news is we can rely on a set of pretty decent products and fairly straightforward visual cues to indicate to birds that they cannot go in a particular direction. The challenge there is that all materials with image formation and or transparency need visual markers. The visual markers need to accommodate all of our visual environments, and the entire surface, yes, all of it does need to be covered. Because as we saw with the natatorium, you can have brick on one side or a brick pattern on glass on one side. And if you have unmarked glass, birds will just fly towards the unmarked glass. Yeah. So it's basically traffic safety, but in 3 dimensions, because birds are like that. They will fly at full speed through tiny spaces. And if the bridge is out, one of these will be a more effective communication device than the other. If you have one hawk sticker in the middle of the window, the bird will fly around it. If you have a mosaic grid of hawk stickers, birds are much less likely to fly around it because there's no around to go because they're too, the gaps are too small. It can be hawk stickers, it can be pianos, it can be Halloween stickers, it can be Christmas stickers. As long as the pattern is dense enough, there's hope. Unfortunately, people put a lot of faith in products that do not work, even though a lot of products claim to work with just one sticker. That being said, if we need to pitch it to architects, it's actually not terribly hard because visual interest, custom patterns, artistic expression, all of those good things can work towards ultimately saving birds. And with the climate doing what it's doing, thermal performance is coming to be much more of a critical point in selling this stuff. Privacy, there are some options that can increase your privacy. Some of them help with glare control. Obviously, you'll be getting higher employee productivity if they're not getting distracted for 15 minutes every time a bird hits, which also lends to occupant well-being. But the thermal performance is really fun because depending on the product that you pick, you can, like the Justice Center has frosted stripes on the glass. That's for thermal performance, not for birds, but it's actually effective for birds too. So architects are doing this anyway. They just need to pick patterns that work slightly differently. Yeah, so glass is complicated. And this is where we can't necessarily broadly paint a one-size-fits-all solution if we are promoting products or if we are writing codes, because every single building is going to have a slightly different set of needs. This lower left corner, that's actually clear glass, but because it's shaded, there's no backlighting, it looks black. That's the same window at a slightly off angle looking completely reflective. So the same spot can look very different just depending on where you are. And so we'd need to pick a product that works in both of those conditions for that particular set of windows. So because everything behaves differently, architects love this. They love modeling thermal performance based on geography, and this is their jam. And their modeling will do wonders for the rest of us. But bird products, when they are tested and certified by the American Bird Conservancy, are tested under static conditions. So, quick crash course in glass. Most windows are double pane. Birds obviously interact with the side that is on the outside, surface 1. Most low energy coatings go on surface 2 or surface 3. And then the inside, where we smush our noses, is surface 4. Things that we put on surface 4, in most cases, are pretty useless. Things on surface 3, in many cases, are pretty useless. Surface 2, in some cases, it can be okay, but surface 1 is where the magic is most likely to happen, if it's going to happen, which is a challenge for the actual glass industry because manufacturing processes can be tricky. And why do these surfaces matter? This is over here in the Allen neighborhood. You can take a couple steps in a different direction, slight angle change, and you can see that a number on, or a marker on surface 1, there's good visual contrast. You even get some shadow there. It really pops. And across the different angles, you can consistently see it. I did add a black and a white stripe to indicate, like, if the number was black, it would actually get lost pretty easily in shadows. stuff on surface 4. If it was black, you would not be able to see it at all in most of these photos. But this is the difference between birds not hitting and probably birds hitting. But again, spacing is everything. This is just letting you know how much visual contrast gets lost between the multiple surfaces. The bottom line is if you can't see it, they can't see it. And the more you see it, the more they see it. So the Justice Center, I guarantee you they were not thinking of birds when they did this. This would have cost them $0 extra in their budget. They did it anyway. Yeah. More of this. You can also do different patterns. Again, if people are factoring thermal performance into their design, this should not be complicated for them. But with products themselves, tests and threat factor scores are not created equal. They do not work across all buildings. Not all products are appropriate for the existing test methods. It's complicated. Tunnel testing is where most of the magic happens. And while it's really good at what it does, what it covers is a very narrow slice of that dynamic lighting range. And the resulting scores that come from it end up being used for code. And you can still make, these are not the greatest examples for what I need to say here, but the limited information that folks are able to draw from to make decisions end up going in different directions. And if people are still hell-bent on using clear products in things like railings, it's not a matter of if birds will hit, it's a matter of when birds will hit and how many. So factoring in bird safety early in the design process will get you something that looks reasonable and not offensive, as opposed to people have to take things into their own hands to fix it. UV products are almost never a good idea. There are very few cases when it's actually a good idea to use them. Too many things need to be taken into consideration to suggest them as a blanket solution. But UV is the darling of everyone because people don't see it and birds supposedly do. However, not all birds see UV. UV is a very short wavelength, and birds that do see UV see the full visible spectrum that we see, but also a hint of UV. So it is really an uphill battle, even for the birds that can see it, for us to, like, this pattern is incredibly faint, and this actual building has been modified since then. Anyway, the Bird Conservancy, American Bird Conservancy, actually has a really good model code. 100% of buildings should be bird friendly for the first 100 feet. And that is fantastic. You can have a bad bus shelter. Bus shelters on average kill between 2 to 10 birds per year if they're glass. It's so easy to fix a bus shelter. A bad one could kill 30 birds a year. But Seattle has done an amazing job of acid etch patterns. There's a study from Poland that says that graffiti saves birds. Like, things like this really indicate that there are some really simple changes that we can make in our community that can be artistic, creative, and actually have a really long-lasting impact in a good way for birds. And then they also suggest, of course, any of the danger zones, clear walkways, clear corners, things like that, needing to be bird friendly regardless of their height. And then the threat factor down here is a little tricky. So most regulations right now are really bad. Canada has a couple decent ones, but there's so many loopholes that you can build something that meets code and it will still be terrible for birds. Anyway, the fresh batch of LEED version 5 just came out last month. And at least they use the 2x2-inch spacing guidelines, but it's still overly complicated and doesn't need to be. But the way most municipalities have written their codes, they don't seem to think that it needs to apply to most buildings, or they've bumped into like square footage. With retrofits, New York is already seeing pushback because folks want to replace 90% of the windows this year and then 10% of the windows next year to avoid triggering the 100% window replacement that would kick in with retrofits. We've also seen like, oh, if you're going to retrofit and replace 50% of the glass, then it kicks in. So they're doing 45% this year and doing 45% next year, and then 10% the year after that. So some of these regulations, the loopholes just never end. And when I talk about test scores and threat factors, a lot of this stuff is getting written into code when anything at 90 millimeters or 4 inches anywhere is not going to prevent hummingbirds from hitting. Hummingbirds, kinglets, siskins, gnatcatchers, some of the smaller warblers. It's like 20% of birds are not going to be helped by stuff that has 4-inch spacing. So the reason these scores came into existence was through tunnel testing, which could not test hummingbirds. So this is basically saying seatbelts are great, but only specifying that seatbelts need to be in the front seat. Like, who needs it in the back seat? The 2x2 helps more than 4x4 because size. So breaking that down, because people think, rightfully so, that a threat factor of 10 should be better than a threat factor of 15 or 20. But not only is that not necessarily the case because they physically cannot test hummingbirds, but every building is different. Some of these products may not work well when backlit. They may not work well with a darkly shaded, complex visual background. It really does depend. And to really hammer it home, this threat factor of 15, these lovely dots here, that same pattern rotated 90 degrees, scored a 20, but both of those do not perform as well as vertical stripes in the wild. So in the test, they still scored well enough to be used, but these perform way better in saving birds in the wild than the dot pattern that, even though it was magically rotated 90 degrees and scored a different score. The test is inconsistent, and it's one of the challenges that the research community is up against. But in the meantime, it's what we have, and people are putting it into code. So yeah, this is what we're working with. And this is where y'all come in, because we can't solve it without a lot of communication. And everyone is trying to reinvent the wheel in this space. I fall somewhere in the research, but not academic kind of lights out group, but also there's a lot going on here. And codes are relying on glass people and researchers, but the industry is waiting for the codes to figure out what they need to build. And architects are just stuck in the middle, and I do feel bad for them, actually. But getting best practices current and making sure that codes can relate to that is going to be a very interesting challenge. The Canadian standards put their bird code into effect in 2019, and their code is structured so that every 5 years it's up for review / updating. I really like that, because it means every 5 years they're like, hey, what's best practices? But there's no indication of where they're sourcing that information, who's on the review committee, like how that process goes. So it's an interesting challenge because almost everything in the architectural world, in the municipal code communication world, all of it points back to the American Bird Conservancy and their test scores, which threat factors, as we saw, can not be the most broadly applicable stats out there. So it's a kind of challenging spot to be in for all of us. But again, things change rapidly. All the information that I send out, I add a note that if it's been more than 4 to 6 months, then contact me. Something probably needs to be updated. But also the year is really important. Some of these buildings that I'm getting contacted about have been constructed within the last 3 to 4 years. They did everything right, and they're getting a ton of birds hitting. But the materials that they're using, they found online, and it's best practices from like 2009. So there are a lot of myths and misunderstandings, and there's just a lot of outdated information about collisions out there. And there are some combinations of things that can work, but if it's on this list, we're there for a reason. And yeah, broadly applying any of this information can get a little messy. Now, when I say that New York did a great job with their code, I mean, they blanket statement said new construction and retrofits need to meet these standards. So they have fewer loopholes in a lot of places. While they do still limit things to various threat factor scores, the New York community has, at this point, 2 decades of closely working with New York City Audubon to get some of this information understood in the architectural community. But it's kind of a mess out there, because if you reach out to ornithologists, they're looking at bird populations, not necessarily picking up things at windows. If you reach out to biologists, they are entirely in the dark because they're not paying attention to buildings at all. Pest control ends up getting a lot of the calls about these questions because birds are pests, and clearly this is like a roosting problem or a nesting problem or poop, right? So they have a very different perspective. Collision researchers, myself, sorry, our plant lights are on the timer. Actually, I hope I can turn it on. Yeah, close enough. Forgot about that. So collision researchers have limited access to glass industry. Architects certainly are not researching this stuff for funsies beyond the American Birding Association, not American Birding Association, American Bird Conservancy. There we go. So glass industry is still restricted by the tests that the American Bird Conservancy does. And then cost and branding wins every time because hawk stickers are cheap and fast, and you feel good once you put them up, and like maybe you're getting less strikes now. So it's a challenge. Risk levels are basically always underestimated. There was a study done in Canada last spring that found, so the people who lived in the home thought that they had 4 strikes during the span of the study, and over 30 were detected. They had a remote camera setup thing going on because they just wanted to find out if people who live in their own home 24/7, because they both worked from home, and they did turn off the cameras when they weren't home, like the vast majority of the strikes, they didn't hear, they didn't see. There were only 4 bodies that they found out of over 30 strikes. So we know that what's happening is way worse than what we're seeing up close and personal. And monitoring, we're up against all kinds of different things. And then when it comes to architects working with clients hear like, oh, a bird safe building, I guess that seems neat, but how much extra might it cost? If the architect hasn't planned in a design with their thermal performance, they might think they have to go for an actual bird safe product separately, which they assume drives up cost, even though it doesn't actually. And it's just this self-perpetuating cycle of things not being done right. So then you have to put a post-it note mural on the library every year or so, so the children will not be horrified during story time when birds hit. But at certain angles, the mural still looks like trees and sky. Anyway, I think I'm neck deep in this, and I think this is the last slide. This is the last slide, y'all. So yeah, collisions themselves can be quite complicated. We have information on how to make it stop. The research community, we're still actually putting together the elephant. We have not pieced it entirely together yet, but if we wait until we've pieced it all together, we will be out of birds by then. And so I think we're in a really good position right now to say, if New York can do it, and they're up against some of the most impressive construction lobbies out there, there's no reason we can't start factoring this into new construction, retrofits, city buildings. U of M actually did, in their July of 2019 campus planning documents, add bird collision considerations into their design guide. Whether or not they use it as more than a bookmark, we'll see. But it's not news to them. So I'm semi-optimistic that they will be considering it in the future, at least. But anyway, I thank you for your time. I'm excited to hear questions that you might have about this and how I can help you help birds in whatever capacity possible.
Thank you, Heidi. That was great. I would like to open this up for, let's say, up to 10 minutes of questions, and I hope that we hear plenty of them from our group here. Any particular questions? Here we go. Commissioner Brown.
Yeah, thanks, Heidi. When you say New York, do you mean New York State or New York City, or?
In this case, New York City proper.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Dale.
Yeah, hi, Heidi, thank you so much. This is a topic I'm really interested in, and I have been wanting to know more about, and clearly have a lot more I still need to understand about it. What I'm wondering is, on one hand, getting into the design guidelines and actually implemented in new builds, but what is the most effective way to go back and retroactively get it into buildings? Is it something that can be applied to the outside of buildings at like a massive scale? And
again, per building, you kind of have to piece together what works best for it, what the goals are of the occupants. It's somewhere between Goldilocks and Cinderella in terms of making sure that you get the right fit. But I will say there's a group called Feather Friendly. They're pretty well known for their dots, I would say. And of course, the slide that I left out of here for the UV stuff is a great example. If you go to the full version of the slideshow, in the UV section, there's a picture of my finger next to a bunch of dots. That is Feather Friendly. That's one of the most widely applied retrofit products. It's very highly effective. Man, if I got commission on the amount of stuff that I I'm a fan. It's super effective. They're not the only product that I adore, but it's pretty straightforward. It works across a lot of different visual situations, and yeah, it's generally very inoffensive to people, and it at scale can be applied pretty quickly too. And honestly, for most of the retrofits, the challenge ends up being the cost of labor. So it's really hard to get a quote on any of these products because they, it might be $1 per square foot, it might be $5 per square foot, but most of it comes down to, do we need to rent a cherry picker to apply it?
Practical comment. Anyone else? Mr.
So
Graham.
this is a film that's applied to the outside, or
It's a set of dots that are made of vinyl film. There's also a product that, you know how buses have ads on the side, but from the inside you can see out, from the outside people can't see in. There's a film very similar to that is often used in deterring bird collisions. I will say, though, they make a clear product of that, and I do not advise that whatsoever. It's 3 times more expensive than their regular baseline solid-looking stuff. But people love it because it's clear, but it does not work because it's clear. That being said, again, as much as I love that it's a uniform surface that, it's like looking through a screen, what I don't love about it is it has a much shorter lifespan than feather friendly. But again, it depends. If people want to do like REI has an ad on their window like every 6 months with something different. For marketing purposes, if people want to do that, awesome. You can swap it out every 6 months and you will never have to deal with it getting crunchy after 7 to 10 years. And you can get really creative with patterns, with your marketing. Art schools love it because, again, there's no limit to the creativity that can go into it. But yeah, there's so many different options.
so it seems like there's just a fundamental conflict between clear glass and bird strikes, and we haven't found a way to figure that out yet.
That's correct.
I am sorry. This is tough.
Yeah. Commissioner Dale, another.
I have a lot of questions, but instead of hitting you with all of them, I'm wondering 2 things, and maybe it's just something you can point us to later or something. Do you know of a list of, whether it's universities or other major institutions that have implemented it, so that we, might look at places that have done that?
Can I share my screen again?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me get back here.
I want to say that we can make available the full set of slides. This was because we had our agenda. Yeah, we'll arrange for that. Thanks.
So this spreadsheet is chaos. It's just for funsies where I dump links, but it addresses in part some of the places that have in writing somewhere in their codes bird-related things. I'm happy to email you this as well, but like there are a lot of groups doing bird safe stuff, and I would say more than half of them are campus-based, and I'm happy to put you in touch with my colleagues at any of these places. Some of them I don't have enough information on. if you know anyone at Colorado State University or St. Lawrence, I have a lot of blanks on here. Like I know they're doing things, but I don't know who has enough information to fill in the blanks on that. But I can hook you up.
I would love to see as much of the spreadsheet as you're willing to share.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can send you a link for it. justsavebirds@gmail.com. I'll send you stuff.
Okay, thanks.
Any other commissioner questions? I just want to say that Heidi, first off, thank you. This was really great. I was kind of fascinated with the whole bus stop thing. You know, it's like a low level collision opportunity, and yet an opportunity to do something pretty good, right? Is something to think about, and maybe we can work with our own bus systems here in town on things like that.
And it's great because you can engage art students, you can engage various elementary schools. You know, here's your bus stop, you get to decorate it however you want. It can be as permanent as you want, it can be as temporary as you want. But yeah, if you're trying to not scare architects or whomever, developers, I'm happy to share this spreadsheet with whomever. But yeah, like it doesn't have to visually be scary, and it doesn't have to financially be scary.
Right. I am so happy that, Juliet, you were able to join us. I wonder if you have any particular comments that you'd like to add, because you know our area, and may have your own concerns and ideas.
My best recommendation is to make your windows safe for birds using one of these outside treatments of the exterior of the window treatment. And I can say that I left one pane of my screen door without dots on it, and I killed a magnolia warbler this fall. Took it to the bird center. It was still alive. It was very feisty, and within 24 hours it died. And so there's so much more going on than we all know. Like Heidi said, there are so many birds that hit and fly off and then die alone somewhere else, not by your window. So each one of us can do something in our own homes to make them more safe for birds. And as for city ordinances and whatnot, that would take a lot more staff consideration and consultation than just my own opinion.
For what it's
Heidi's work has been fantastic and visionary, and the movement has grown up around her in our community. Yeah.
A couple of years ago, John Lowry, who's a member of Washtenaw Audubon, shared with me that he had ordered Kaleidoscape, which is the solid-looking material that you can see out just fine, but from the outside looks solid. And he had gotten enough to do his entire house, and so he did his entire house, but had not gotten around to doing one of the smaller kitchen windows. And it took 10 years before an ovenbird hit that window.
But
it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Yeah. So if we all fixed one window that we know a bird hit, like, I think I ran the numbers on this. Since 2004, I have presented or in one form or another done outreach for approximately 36,000 people. And if each of them fixed one window that killed 15 birds a year, so this would be like a bad window, or two windows that combined killed 15 birds a year, that would be 530 something thousand birds per year saved. And like, I have to hope that this link that I've pulled up right here, my current house has pretty steep overhangs, so I don't really need to worry about rain directly hitting the glass. But a friend of mine, colleague in Canada, busted out a bunch of markers to see how they would do in the weather. A friend of mine in Dexter did the 2-inch white stripes on her house in 2017 or 18, and she hasn't even needed to touch those up yet. And she has had no strikes at her house at all since doing this. And it's just, a $3 marker.
Wow.
Yeah. It's just, you have to get out there and do it.
Mhm.
But,
Yeah, that's what I did as soon as that magnolia warbler hit my little screen door, was make a 2x2 grid with a magic marker, washable marker. We can all do something
Right.
personally to save birds from hitting glass. Yeah.
Oh, I see 2 more hands. Commissioner Ackman.
Thank you. What about screens? Like if you have screens over your windows, that's
screens
good.
are great. I love
Okay.
screens. They have to be on the outside surface. For some reason,
Yep.
I've seen a lot of houses in Michigan that have the screens on the inside. But yes, screens are
Okay.
wonderful.
That explains why I have just one window that has strikes, because the screens happen to be on the inside of that window.
They're certainly not perfect, but they are so much better than the alternative.
Thank you.
Commissioner Graham. And I think this should
Okay,
probably be
those-
the last question for now, but we'll move on. Well, I mean, we'll get more. Yep.
So the stripes or dots or whatever, 2 inches max apart.
Yep.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you
And
very
the-
much for doing.
Of course, yeah. And about the screen thing, that's also the least offensive option for almost any HOA.
And it makes sense to them, probably. That's part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if they have any complaints, at least with the markers, you can wipe them down, wait till they're not looking, or do them on the side of the house that nobody can see.
Right. Great. Thank you. Well, I hope that this is just the beginning of some conversations that we can have on this particular issue. And I'm hoping that Heidi and perhaps you, Juliet, as well, could join some of our discussions in our newly launched biodiversity work group, because this may be something that we want to work on together and bring something back to the Environmental Commission for further consideration. So I'm hoping that that's the case, that we can do that.
Well, thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you
This is
very
great.
much. Thanks to Heidi,
Right.
all of her hard
Yeah.
work.
All right. All right. So I'm going to move us on to our next item. And that is bringing us back once again to administrative review of our Environmental Commission bylaws. We are almost done, I hope. And we got some help from the city's DEI office, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion office. I'm looking for my copy. Here it is. And I hope that you all have had a chance to at least scan the red line document that we sent out. And I'd like to just quickly go through these. My goal for tonight would be for us to look at what these items are that are redlined, see if we agree with them and are ready to move this on to further review by staff, and then the next steps, which I think is legal team and then city council. Is that correct, Sean?
I would also recommend letting Public Works do a review of it, as that the new staff liaison, the environmental services manager, will be in that department, and just the switch of liaison from OSI to Public Works, it seems to make sense to me for Public Works to take a look. But
okay, so quite a few months sounds like. Okay, but what I'm hoping is that we get it moved out of our review process and moved on to the next and shepherd it through. Okay, Sean, do you mind sharing the screen, and we'll just tick these off. There are not very many, but I did find a couple of small things that I wanted to highlight for the group. So in our purpose, objectives, and duties, there's a suggestion from the DEI office that we add the final statement, which is the commission will approach their work through a lens of environmental equity and justice, and the commission acknowledges the historical inequitable practice against marginalized communities, including but not limited to Indigenous nations, who were shepherds of the land and water in Ann Arbor. I have a personal comment on that one, but I wonder if anyone from the group has anything to call out or comment. And I think, Commissioner Graham, is your hand still up, or is that an active question? Okay. All right, I'll just say my particular question that I asked is about the use of the word "were" as past tense, because I think that there are Indigenous people in our midst. And so I think what I would ask is how to craft a statement that shows that there's sort of an ongoing stewardship or engagement that we would like to encourage. So I don't feel like it's correct to wordsmith this here at this point, but I just raised that question about stating this as a past kind of thing, and actually acknowledging that there are living, breathing, active Indigenous people and others.
A model for making progress and making real efforts in this area is David Michener's work with Indigenous tribes at Mathi Gardens.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know of anyone else who has done more or gained more trust or has leaped ahead of most of us in not just recognizing, but in actually figuring out ways to do stuff. And I don't know what the answers are for the city. I would just recommend that we have some kind of group come together and work on it. Certainly, the protection of the city's biodiversity honors the about 10,000 years stewardship of Native Americans here, who presented us with an extraordinary environment when we arrived. We Europeans arrived. Our statements should be backed up with some actual work. Just my opinion.
I think that is excellent. And I'd like to see us take action on that. Certainly we can work on language, but it's beyond that, right, Chris? It's more than just what's written here. It's like living this.
And the bridges to cross to gain trust are very deep and very difficult.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I agree. Thank you. So let's just take that on as kind of like an advisement thing. And I do like the idea of reaching out to David Michener. That would be very helpful. I hope that we can accomplish that. All right. So our next change item is in section 325, where we added challenges to biodiversity as one of our items for advice to council and the city administrator. And any comments on that? That's really what we've been talking about for a while. Let's just go down to number 7. We added to advise the city council administrator on matters relating to sustainable development, clean production, environmental technologies, biodiversity, and strategies of the city's A20 carbon neutrality plan that are associated with solid waste and natural features. You good to go on that? I'm hearing nothing. I'm going to move on to number 9. This would now read to publish and present an annual report to City Council on the activities and recommendations of the work groups, committees, and the commission as a whole. It leaves out a lot of the particular detail, but I think it's more consistent with where we are likely to operate and doesn't kind of box us in too tightly. What do you all think about this? Okay. Let's move on to number 11. I'm going to take nothing, no comments as yes. Number 11 is to advise City Council and the City Administrator on enhancing the awareness, understanding, commitment, and active involvement of skip locals, of community members in ensuring wise stewardship of the city's natural resources and enhancement of biodiversity now and in the future through education, volunteerism, public-private partnerships, and incentive programs. I see your hand, Commissioner Graham.
Forgive me, I did appreciate the change made in the previous document that changed our original language that I suggested to prove residency as the qualifying factor for issuing a driver license to anyone and everyone, regardless of citizenship status. I appreciated the change, whoever made it. Thank you. Sorry to.
Okay, that's in our lobbying document. This is still our bylaws.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. We're coming to that one.
Okay.
That's okay. Okay.
I wasn't getting behind.
No, you were not. You were way ahead.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. The next one down is got that. Okay. A new number 15 to create a create subquorum work groups designated to report back to the commission as a whole with recommendations. And then there's a reference below, but that's not to be part of the bylaws ultimately. All right. And then we would just renumber the subsequent items. And then we're going on to way down to a question to our city attorney about conflict of interest. Just how do we do the annual process? Is there a paper or something we need to sign or some way to acknowledge that? So that is not part of the bylaws. It's just a question to address the management of our conflict of interest statement. Okay. Next one is pretty far along. It is Article 7.12. There it is. This is just something that I just noticed, that it was like our bylaws said that we were going to have public comment for 2 minutes, but our practice has been 3 minutes, and council uses 3 minutes. So I propose that we use 3 minutes for us in our bylaws. See no comment. If you have one, let me know. Otherwise, we're going to move on to. Is that the end? Not quite. Okay. 9.6. Yeah. Which is the commission may also create work groups or designate certain members to perform research or development recommendations on specific topics without creating a committee. Committee is really a more formal kind of arrangement. And this is just to support our more informal kind of activities. And that's that. So, Environmental Commission. Any comments, concerns, questions? Hearing none. I'm going to just ask if we could have a motion to proceed with management of these through the city process, and we'll ask Sean to give us some guidance and the legal team as well. Could I have a motion? Thank you, Commissioner Dale, seconded by Commissioner Curtis. Everyone okay with moving our bylaws forward as written? Raise your hand. I see almost everyone. Commissioner Graham, are you voting okay with this, or?
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, we got 100%. Thank you all. Thanks. Here we go. Moving at a snail's pace. Our next item that we were going to talk about has to do with preparing us really for our next session, but at least a brief discussion of things that we would like to ask our city our city lobbyists to work on in the name of environmental issues, that we would advise council to ask our lobbyists to move forward. And so with that, I at Commissioner Curtis's good suggestion, included the list that we had prepared in March. And I wonder if anyone has any additions to this for natural features, solid waste, water quality, pollinators. I see Commissioner Callowart. Thank you.
Yeah, something that's come up with the circular economy discussions is a ban on compact fluorescents because they contain mercury, and encouraging the shift to LEDs.
Ah, okay. Do you see that as being like a state level thing?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know of any active legislative effort to date?
I've asked the new circular economy staff member to pass that along. It was Will, is his name, Will Garcia, who brought that up. So as soon as I get some more information from him on that, I'd be happy to pass that along.
That's great. Okay. That sounds great. Yeah. I was worried about those bulbs. Commissioner Graham?
Of course, there almost are no complex fluorescents in the stores anymore. Almost everything there is LED, which is going in the right direction very fast. I know there's some, but and I think prices favor the LEDs.
Yep. Commissioner Brown.
Regarding solid waste number 1, which is amend 115 to prevent organic waste disposal in landfills. There's a complication here in that almost all municipal solid wastes are, wastewater treatment waste, sewage sludge, relabeled as biosolids. They're sufficiently contaminated with PFAS chemicals that our own city has no longer spreading them on agricultural fields, but shipping them to a landfill, pending determinations of what the legal status is going to be. Because there are extensive legacy contaminations. There's been, EGLA has been resistant to test any agricultural fields or biosolids being applied on agricultural land. So this is a gray area right now that's probably going to fall into a situation where most municipal organic biosolids will not be legally disposable on agricultural lands. So the only other is landfills.
Are they going to a toxic landfill, Stephen, or are they going to Arbor Hills?
I'm not exactly sure. I think city staff will have to be asked that question. But part of the way this is all in flux is because, the EPA still hasn't acknowledged any of these as hazardous wastes.
Well, there are farms that have been completely ruined by this practice.
Yep. That's correct. The regulatory apparatus moves very slowly.
Seems like a good idea for us to provide a strong nudge. Any others in addition to what is included in our packet? Councilmember Dish.
Yeah, I wanted to put in a plea for tipping fees, for legislation to increase the cost of tipping fees in Michigan, because, and this too comes out of the work of the circular economy / formerly known as Zero Waste working group, because if one of the barriers to an effective construction and demolition policy is if it's cheaper for people to landfill their stuff, then bring it to the C&D sorting facility and pay whatever fee they have to pay and get the value they get for that. So, and I know that Yusuf Rabi used to be very excited about tipping fees. Of course, he's not in the Senate anymore, but I think that there's probably support from Senator Irwin, and I know that there has been a bill on that, but I do not know what it is, but I can do some checking and find out what there is there. And I wondered, did when I suppose you've all looked at the document that Sean sent us, Mr. Reynolds sent us, that has what the council's policy suggestions are, what the policy committee's formal program is. It's clearly very rigorously prioritized, and it's clear that they got a lot of staff feedback in doing it. I mean, you could tell that sustainability staff had a lot of input because a lot of the energy policies that we need to reach A20 are foregrounded in that. I'm wondering if it would be worthwhile to prioritize these still further.
You mean our list or the one
yes.
or the one that council has done?
Yeah,
okay.
Our list, because councils used to be a huge long grab bag, and I think that it was less effective that way. And so I think that the policy committee this year, or I guess at this point it's last year, but anyway, did put a lot of effort of thinking about priorities and really connecting the suggestions to city initiatives that are seen as very high priority and that are underway. And so I think it would take some hard choices to do that with this list. And so I don't know if that's the best idea, or if it's because this is coming from a commission, if simply putting forward everything that that we can see as valuable and allowing the policy committee to prioritize and weed out would be the best strategy. And I'm actually kind of posing that as an open question to anyone here, what they think would be best. And if people are amenable to tipping fees, I'm happy to keep to find out more information about that. And then I wondered if anybody could just illuminate what you take to be the current state policy on deer and what we would be asking for from the state. Legislative discussion regarding deer management. If anyone could just, because I'm confused. I mean, I know that a problem we have with the state is that they won't let us do a sterilization thing anymore. That was a pilot project and they won't bring that back. And that was effective and good. And it was something that people could come together around, and that didn't activate so many of the animal rights activists. And they won't let us do that anymore. So is that the discussion that we want to reopen? Because otherwise, I don't think that they have a lot of bearing. I mean, like, we could do what we want, except we can't do another sterilization program. It's more up to us. So I'm not sure what the legislative discussion would look like other than a discussion around the sterilization pilot. So did anyone have what's the thinking behind that?
I think that I can't fully speak to the full range of this, except to say that there is still concern about deer management in the city and in our region in general, and the effect that it has on the full ecosystem.
Yep, I totally understand that.
So yeah.
But I'm not sure why that would be something we would lobby at the state level over, unless we wanted to lobby about, but it wouldn't be the legislature. It would be Eagle that we need to lobby about letting us sterilize again. I mean, this is a city issue.
There's very little chance of that. The hunters hold heavy sway, even in a Democratic legislature. That's the hunting community was extraordinarily offended by it.
Offended by the sterilization? So,
Yes.
okay. So all I can say is right now, this was a carryover from our prior discussion. And so I think it remains a concern of our group. And so that's why it's still on this list.
Yeah, I'm saying that I understand that, but if this list isn't to be on the policy committee's state legislative lobbying, I don't think this belongs on it, because I don't think that it's, I don't think that that's where the pressure needs to be. I mean, I am, as you know, concerned about our deer management policies, but unless someone could specify what they think we need from the state, I'm not sure that it should be on here.
Yesterday at the State Parks Advisory Committee meeting, I brought up the subject of the duty of the DNR and particularly the Parks Division to protect biodiversity on the state parks. And I suggested that we sit down with hunters and MUCC and state parks folks and wildlife folks and work out a way to deal with too many deer on our state parks, many of which represent the highest level of biodiversity in the state. I don't know the answer, but I think some of the things that we discovered in Ann Arbor about how to go about these things will contribute to that answer. And I think there's no doubt, and I think the majority of people recognize there is no doubt. In southern Michigan, we have too many deer, particularly in our urban and suburban areas. And there needs to be some serious work done to find a way to deal with this. We were very successful in 2 parts of our city, somewhat successful in the 3rd part. Never mind sterilization, we were very successful in making a drastic change in the damage that was occurring here. And we need to get back to it, and we need to do our best to inform other people in the state about how to go about it. Much is happening, actually. A lot of people, a lot of places are getting very frustrated. We did a great job, and we have to find a way to get through this problem. A lot of people say, well, we have too many coyotes, we have too many geese, we have beaver, for heaven's sakes. Nothing in any of those nuisance animals rises to the degree of damage to our biodiversity and our ecosystems that deer are presenting us. I'm not arguing with you, Lisa. I am simply saying that we got to get there somehow.
So I agree, and I'd like us to keep this on our list for discussion. So we have another session where we can do this at the end of November, and I'm hoping that we can have perhaps our discussion in our biodiversity work group specifically, and see if we can come up with some suggestions and some ways forward. That's what I'd like to take as an approach. I would like to add to this list support for some legislation that is ongoing with respect to pollinators specifically, and it is some legislation that's being right now, one bill in particular with an associated one is being shepherded through by Representative Reingans, District 47 of the House. And it is with restricting use of neonicotinoid pesticides as a class from use on the state's public lands. So it's under discussion, I know, and I would just like to send support for that to go forward. As Ann Arbor saying, we support it. That is my one wish to add to this, and at least it's specific enough and has some current activity. Anyone else with any additions? Then I think with that, I'm going to ask that each of the work groups take a look at this and see if we want to tighten up any of the aspects of the document. Certainly, that seems like a reasonable kind of thing to me. With that, any other questions or comments about this particular thing on our agenda tonight? Because I think we are at a point to call for reports from our committees, other commissions and council. Okay. First up, let's go with biodiversity. Commissioner Graham, do you want to take a lead on that? We may or may not have it.
We've met twice and are inventing our duties and working through a whole set of ideas about what we might do and how we might do it. Without, I would say, a huge degree of commitment in one direction. There's too much on the table still. Perhaps once we get to the next meeting, we'll be doing better. But at least there's an interest in trying to gather a group of people who are extraordinarily well informed in this area to begin to talk with us about what it would take practically and effectively to not just protect the biodiversity we have in the city, but improve it. And I'm very tickled about the bird presentation tonight because clearly birds, particularly songbirds and migratory birds, are in great decline right now. There are birds I used to see frequently when I was a little boy. I never see anymore in the city, and including pheasant out my back window. That was not a native species, but nonetheless, they're gone, and gone for much of the state. And so I will keep you posted. I'm thrilled at this kind of reinvention of what we're doing with natural features in the city, and think it will bear more interesting fruit. And one really needs to thank Rita and Brooks for their leadership in this idea and this way of going ahead.
All right, thank you for that report. Let's go to circular economy.
Sure, I'll get it started, and then Lisa, please add whatever you'd like or I miss. So we meet monthly. We met last week. So let me back up. Our focus this fall or this year is on C&D, correction and demolition, and working on pulling together information, analyzing that, and thinking about, is it possible to move forward with some type of ordinance for that within the city and or in partnership with the county. We've pulled together a lot of information. We started to analyze that. Right now, we are focused on conversations with other municipalities that have implemented C&D ordinances. Last week, we had a wonderful conversation with several reps from Wisconsin, Madison, and the surrounding county. And next month, we're going to be talking with representatives from the city of Austin. So that's kind of our focus. There's a lot of good things going on, but the main challenge seems to be, how do we move forward in the best way, knowing that there isn't really a facility now to take things at scale. Lisa?
You are, as always, superb at doing this, John. I would add that I think what Sarah Mason said at our last meeting was really that right now we're in a phase of deciding if this is even something we should be pursuing right now. Because it does appear, I mean, unless it would turn out that our current MRF has capacity to take C&D waste, which I don't know that it does. Madison has 2 sorting facilities, so 2 MRFs basically, and so that would put it pretty far off. So still, it is great to be exploring this and talking to other cities who've done this, and Madison gave us really great feedback and inspiration around how they're able to, even without perfect reporting from the people that are participating and dealing responsibly with their stuff, they're able to talk about carbon emissions that they're achieving from it. And so, we could do some good work, but
if I may just add an item to include, it occurs to me that there are a number of developments under proposal that will replace a lot of buildings. I'm thinking of south of Packard toward Madison, a lot of buildings that when I look at them, I see these gorgeous carved foundation stones from the 1800s. And the thought of losing those just in landfill is kind of painful. And so I don't know what to say about that, but it would be so great to address that. There are windows and doors there that function, right? If there's any way to manage that. And I know that timing is an issue right now, right?
Increase tipping fees, back to our policy agenda.
Yeah. Can that be done fast? Let's go for it.
Keep pushing.
Okay. All right. Let's see. All right. I'm going to lose track, but I think that next is parks.
Hi, that's me.
Hi. Thank you, Commissioner Marsan.
We met last week. The Parks Commission met last week. We had a presentation on the city golf courses. They had a huge turnout this year for golf. Set a record this year, the number of rounds played at both golf courses. They also talked about the various, some of the stewardship projects that they carry out on the golf courses. The Monarchs in the Rough. We have 4 acres of wetland on golf courses. Solar panels are being installed at both or have been installed at both, and they're working on using organic fertilizer to keep the grass looking nice. And then we had a presentation on the Barton Bandamere Tunnel Trail and Tunnel project. It's going to be done in 2 phases. This winter, they will be paving the section in the Barton Nature Area that's going to become part of the Border to Border Trail. And then late summer, they hope to begin work on the underpass that's going to go underneath the railroad track to connect Bandamere to Barton. And then finally, we had a presentation on a big project that's going to be happening at the Barton Dam. There's the embankment that forms the I think that's that'd be the west side of the Barton Pond. It's going to have it needs to be reinforced with it's an earthen embankment, and it needs to have more earth. I don't know all the technical details of it, but this is work that's mandated by the federal agency, I think it is, that ensures that our dams are safe. And that project is going to be a long one because access to the embankment is via the parks, via the path that's in the park there, because they need to go underneath the railroad track that is right that traverses right there between the embankment and Huron River Drive. So this project is going to take about 24 months. And during that time, access to the Barton Dam is going to be cut off. Like right now, park users can go up to the dam and cross it. So during that time, they will not be able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So this is going to be a long project. So it's going to probably start next summer, 2024. And that's all I have.
Thank you. That's really very interesting, all of it. Okay, I think our next one is transportation. Commissioner Ackman.
Yeah, I have a couple things. One resolution that was passed in our last city council meeting that first was passed by Transportation Commission, and that was about restoring safe, comfortable walking and bike facilities across the 8 crossings across US 23 that we have within the city. So that is a request of MDOT. It also calls for them not to widen the freeway in the process of this $250 million project, that we should be instead investing in thinking about ways to facilitate mass transit on those corridors. There's another one, I guess this is my city council report because this one didn't go through the Transportation Commission first, but it is transportation related. And that is the resolution that we passed calling on MDOT not to build a 6-mile wall, I believe it was, through Ann Arbor along the railroad tracks. Basically, we're calling on them to, we all want safe, legal crossing across the railroad tracks. There are better ways to do it than building a wall. And I think they actually listened, because the last I saw, they had updated and said they're going to re-engage with the different municipalities and the community. I guess I don't know really what that means, but it seems like we at least got their attention. So that seems like a positive.
Thank you. So I have a thing to add to that, which is a concern that I think has been raised by people in that group, which is wildlife crossing of those areas that are right along the river. It's just such a natural kind of thing. And
yeah, I'm sorry I didn't
berries,
mention that.
Yeah, the berries.
That was one of the
causes.
things mentioned in the petition that we cited too, and in the resolution. So thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah. Thank you. Go for it. Okay. All right. Have I missed? We do need planning and city council, I guess, are the two that I know, and I may have missed another one.
Also Energy Commission and Water Quality.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Energy? You want to hear from Energy? I know John Mirsky is not here today. So I think that's no info. And I'm sorry, Sean, I did not hear the second one you said.
The Water Quality Working Group.
Oh, water quality.
Yeah. Let's see. We have not met, but I have 2 things I'd like to announce. And one is that the Huron River Watershed Council, is working through its Mid-Michigan Partners Consortium to come up with TMDL recommendations for, I want to remind people that the city's in a consent decree with EGLA to reduce its phosphorus pollution, nutrient pollution of the Huron River, which is causing harmful algal blooms or contributing to harmful algal blooms in Fort Lake and Belleville Lake downstream of Ann Arbor. And so they're working out a plan, and it's still in a draft form, so there's nothing specific to report now. It's going to be slow. The basic action that's mandated over the next couple of years is just gathering more data, is what I've heard so far. So I'll report back when I hear more about this. The second thing is that Yesterday there was a press conference. Jeff Irwin, our state senator, has been driving legislation to bring back polluter accountability legislation. So a whole package of bills was submitted simultaneously by Jason Morgan, who's our House representative in Ann Arbor, and who replaced Yusuf Rabi. And so they've introduced a whole set of bills, both in the House and the Senate. And there was a press conference held yesterday morning at 9 a.m. In Lansing. And so there's a YouTube recording of that I could share with people if they're interested. But this is important legislation. It existed here. It was first proposed in around 1990 or earlier by Alana Pollock, who was a state senator at the time. Now she's on the board of LCV. And but the legislation was gutted by Governor Engler back in 1994. So it's not the same as the legislation before because knowledge has changed since then. So there's a pretty good bill package, and they've done a good job. It looks like it's got bipartisan support. And so, the only objection is going to come from the Chemistry Council and the American Chemistry Council and the Chamber of Commerce, the state's Chamber of Commerce. So we're seeing how that's going to get through the legislature, but it's looking good so far. And people are urging everybody to contact their senator, their elected representatives in the state, including the governor, about what they think about this package. That's it.
Great. Thank you. All right. Coin toss, Planning Commission versus Council.
So there's really just two things I think going on. One is that Planning Commission, will be talking next week about extending the TC1 zoning to Plymouth Road. And there's a public outreach meeting. There's been a public outreach meeting for that one already. And there is upcoming a public outreach meeting for the Washington corridor. And the other thing is that we had another meeting with the folks who are redeveloping part of Briarwood. And it is what we hope for, in the sense that they are, taking a parking lot and turning it back into a green space with housing, which is the reverse of Joni Mitchell. So yay. And they are committed to an all-electric facility, provided that DTE confirms that there is capacity. And so I don't quite know how to interpret that, because DTE hasn't been entirely cooperative. But I think the developer is an advocate for electrification. And so that's where we are. And as far as that's all I can think of that is directly relevant to this group.
Thank you. That's exciting. All right, Council. Would you like to take that, Councilmember Ackman?
I think I reported everything that was relevant to this group, unless I missed anything, Councilmember Dish.
Okay. All right. Did I miss anything? Can you give me a
Just the chairperson's report.
That's the chairperson's report. Hello. I have not a lot to report. My report was more on related to the biodiversity and the legislation related to pollinators. You have, Sean, thank you, given us a great report from staff, which includes our new environmental services manager coming up. There was something else I was going to say. That's really it. All right. Right. Any other questions or comments right now from anyone? Because I would move on to announce our next scheduled meeting, which is different. from our usual pattern. It will be, we've got to get there, Thursday, November 30th after Thanksgiving. And this is because of our schedule that often impinges on the holidays to avoid that. So this will be our year-end meeting. Our next one will be at the end, toward the end of January. So November 3rd, 30th for our next meeting. I'd like to move on now to the second public comment. This is an opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes. Please call 888-788-0099 and enter meeting ID 922-9696-1644. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand one by one using the last 3 digits of your phone number. In order to electronically raise your hand, please press *9 on your phone. You'll hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. Press *6 to unmute your phone. And when speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any television or background sounds so that we may hear you clearly. Please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. Thank you. Sean, do you see any hands raised?
We do not have any right now.
Okay. I'll give a short pause. And just say to you all, thank you for being here this meeting, and thank you for all your dedication to environmental issues, which are so important for all of us. And next, any additional hands, John?
We do not have anyone calling in.
Okay. All right, I would like to entertain a motion to adjourn. Anyone want to raise your hand for Commissioner Brown? Thank you. Commissioner Curtis, second. All in favor of adjourning? Raise your hand. Thank you. Y'all are great. Thank you. I like working with you a lot.
Thank you, Rita.
Good night.
Thank
you. Thank you.